So just to start off then, a little bit about what I'm going to cover today. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about me, who I am and my background and why I'm here basically. Then the fundamentals of well-being, as I call them, and they're very much my fundamentals, and it's not just about nutrition. I'm going to cover the macronutrients, the micronutrients, hydration, and then a little bit about whether you need supplements or not. And hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised about that. And then I'm going to talk about some performance nutrition basics, and so how to fuel your workouts that you do at Orange Theory. And then I'm going to finish off with some myth busting. Hopefully you'll get some of the answers to this through what I say during the talk, but it's always good to have a bit of debate and discussion. So hopefully that'll be a good part of the session tonight. And then finally, we'll go over any questions and answers that you've got. So about me, so previously I worked as a police officer for about 19 years. I know I don't look that old. Did a massive pivot and career change and went back to uni at Sheffield Hallam to study nutrition. So yeah, I came out with a first class degree in nutrition, diet and lifestyle. And part of that degree was covering things like sports nutrition and physical activity. So sort of things that I was interested in. I'm an associate registered nutritionist, and you can see on the bottom the logo that I've put on some of the slides there with the Association for Nutrition. And the reason I've put that on is because for me it's really important that anyone can call themselves a nutritionist or a nutrition coach, you know, with quite minimal qualifications or sometimes even none at all. And because nutrition can be quite complex, I think it's really important that people get their advice from someone who's qualified and someone who's registered with the Association for Nutrition. So because I'm fairly new, the first few years you were associate registered nutritionist, and then you sort of do some more sort of work experience and qualifications, and you can become fully registered. But it also means that well, to get on the Association for Nutrition register, you have to have done a degree. And it also means, because I adhere to a code of conduct, that, you know, everything I do, the evidence, the information I give is evidence-based, so it's trustworthy. So I think that's really, really important. I am a freelance nutritionist. I have my own business, as you can see on the logo on the screen, and I do one-to-one consultations, predominantly on Zoom at the minute. I'm based in Derby, so I can, you know, work with clients across the country, and hopefully soon I'll be moving to more face-to-face consultations. I specialise in, it's quite an umbrella term, lifestyle nutrition, but it covers things like if you are suffering from gut health issues, whether you want to talk about your immune system, energy levels, menopausal nutrition, whether you have type 2 diabetes. It kind of covers lots of things. Performance nutrition or sports nutrition, and I've just recently done a course in applying intuitive eating principles and the non-diet approach for working with clients, and that was done with the London Centre for Intuitive Eating. And that's something that I'm quite passionate about, and I'll, you know, talk about that in a little while when I go on to talk about my approach. So I've been doing a few Orange Theory workouts recently at Derby. Some of you may recognise me as that person floundering on the treadmill. I'm not very good on the treadmill. Definitely my happy place is with a barbell, but I think it's given me a really good perspective of the sort of workouts that you do, and it's going to help me. It's helped me with this talk. So my approach then, as I said, every nutritionist is very different in how they approach things. They may have done the same qualifications, but they'll work differently with clients. Today I'll be giving quite a general overview. Hopefully I'll consolidate the information that Izzy gave in her talk the other week, which I've watched and was really good. So yeah, but it is going to be quite generic advice because I'm talking to a group. It's really important with nutrition that you recognise that one size doesn't fit all. There's no such thing as the perfect diet for everybody. Everyone is very different. So I tend to give quite individual advice when I'm working one-to-one. People will have different dietary requirements, different likes, dislikes, allergies, intolerances, specific goals, you know, whether you can cook or not. All this needs to be taken into account when you're providing nutrition advice. So just bear that in mind today, that this is going to be a bit more generic. I sort of kind of focus on overall health and well-being as well. So it's not just about, you know, losing weight, it's about your mental health and physical health, and what I call finding your healthy. And I'm very client-centered. And what that means is obviously I work to what you need. And I've been trained in motivational interviewing as well. So that helps when I work with a client. It's a client kind of like I sort of guide the client to find their own solutions, because they tend to be more long-standing and work better. And finally, like I say, I'm kind of anti-restrictive and anti-restrictive diets, anti-fad diets. I want to help people with more long-term, help you find your own way to be healthy, something that's, you know, not going to be a short-term fix, if that makes sense. My ethos is very much about adding into your diet as opposed to restricting or taking things away. So the fundamentals, as I say, these are kind of my fundamentals. They're not all about food. There's much more to nutrition than just food. Nutrition science is complicated. Eating healthily is complicated. Behavior change is hard. Food choices are more complex than just, you know, finding something to fuel you or finding something that you enjoy eating. Food choices about social aspects, cultural aspects. It's about what you can afford. It's about what gives you pleasure. So it's really, really like complex decisions that we make all the time about food. So improving your health, your overall health and well-being, sort of is a holistic approach, and we look at all of these things. So one of the first things I look at is someone's sleep, for example, and everything's interlinked. So if you suffer from a chronic lack of sleep, this can impact on your hunger and fullness hormones. So those who are struggling with sleep tend to find that their ghrelin hormone, which is the hunger hormone, is increased. And this makes you hungry, and you tend to eat more things that are maybe sugary or fatty. That's the kind of things that you crave. If you're tired, you're probably less likely to you know, do your physical activity or exercise. And stress is another factor that can impact on your food choices. If you're feeling stressed and struggling, you're less likely to make healthy food choices. You probably don't want to cook, and you're probably not going to do your exercise. So those kind of three are all interlinked. I'm going to focus more today on the overall nutrition, hydration, and supplementation. But one thing I'd like you to take away from today is it's what you do over all the weeks and months that matters. You know, if you go out for a meal, you have a takeaway one day, or you don't exercise, or you're not suddenly going to gain a load of weight, you're not suddenly going to become unhealthy. It's what you do over the longer term, those consistent healthy habits, that's what matters. Right, now I'm going to move on to the macronutrients, which are your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fats. Now, I'm not going to go into like stacks of detail here because I'm really conscious that Izzy covered this really well in her talk the other day. So if you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to view it, because she spoke quite clearly and eloquently about you know, the science behind amino acids and so on and so forth. But I will just give a very brief overview. I'm going to start with talking about carbs. And I would say, don't fear the carbs. I know lots of people think, oh, I shouldn't eat carbs, it's going to make me fat. That being said, not all carbs are created the same. There are differences between the carbohydrates that are in like crisps and chips and so on, cake, sweets, very different to the carbohydrates that are our fruit, veg, pasta, rice, and so on. So there's very different ways that they're metabolized in the body. Things like your fruit, your veg, your grains, all full of fibre. And fibre is really, really important for health. The studies show that fibre intake, having a good fibre intake, is protective against heart diseases, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers like colon cancer. And as a nation, we're really not eating enough fibre at the minute. We should be having around 30 grams a day of fibre. That's the daily recommended amount, but we're having around about 19-20 grams of fibre. So I'd really recommend that you try and up your fibre as much as possible. It can help you feel fuller for longer as well. That being said, if you don't eat a lot of fibre, if you're not a big fruit and veg or grains person, take it steady if you are going to make that change into your diet. If you suddenly have loads of fibre really quickly, it's going to have an impact on your gut. And I don't know if anyone's eaten yet, but so I won't go into too much detail, but you can imagine the sort of impact it's going to have on your gut, because that's yeah, well, going into the large intestine, you know what happens after that. So try and increase your fibre, but do it steadily. So maybe increase by 1 more portion of fruit and veg each week and see how you get on. We should be having at least 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. And again, as a nation, we're not necessarily achieving that in a lot of places. So my top tip today would be to experiment with frozen fruit and veg. It's really cheap, really convenient, doesn't go off. You can just grab it out of the freezer, and you can, you know, use like frozen chopped onion, peppers and stuff, and just chuck them into your stir fries, curries, chilies, whatever you're making, pasta, sauces, without having to do loads of prep. So really easy. And then frozen fruit, you can add into your porridge, add to your cereal, put into smoothies. So just to help you get that extra bit of fruit and veg. And frozen, actually, from a nutrient profile, are just as good, if not better, than fresh, because all those nutrients are locked in as soon as it's picked and then frozen. Protein, which is needed for pretty much every function in our body. So it's not just about getting your gains on. We need protein for, you know, hormones, our hair, our skin. Like collagen is a protein. It also helps us feel full, because when we our bodies metabolize protein, we use up a little bit more energy to digest protein than we do our carbs and our fats. So it can help us feel full and burn off a little bit of energy as well. Most of us can get what we need protein wise daily just from diet, and I'm going to talk about protein powder as a supplement a little bit later. Most protein sources are, you know, we get protein from things like eggs, meat, fish, dairy, but we also get protein from a lot of plant-based sources. So if you are plant-based in your diet, you can absolutely get your protein requirements from food. So things like your chickpeas, your lentils, your quinoa, tofu, oats have got protein in, corn products and so on and so forth, beans, legumes, all good sources of protein. And I think Izzy touched on this in her talk, but I think it's important to sort of reiterate, the only thing you need to be mindful of when you're plant-based with protein is to mix different types of protein. It's called protein complementation, because plant-based proteins don't contain all the essential amino acids that we need in our body. So all that means is just mix up a couple of sources of protein, and you can do that across the day. It doesn't have to be in each meal. So practically, you're looking at something like, say, a veggie chili that's full of beans, have that with rice. You could have a lentil dal and have that with bread or rice, things like falafel wraps. And soy products are actually the only, I think, the only plant-based protein that's got all amino acids. So if you have soy yogurt, tofu, and so on, then that's fine. That is a complete protein in its own right. But you can definitely get enough protein from plants. Finally, we've got fats. So again, like carbs, not all fats may be created equal. So we have saturated fat and unsaturated fat. Saturated fats we find more in animal products, and they tend to be more solid at room temperature. So like butter, meat, coconut oil is a saturated fat. And I know, like with Joe Wicks, it's like, yay, coconut oil in everything. It's like the best thing, but it's higher in saturated fat than butter. So it might taste good in curries and so on, but just be mindful when using coconut oil that is saturated. Unsaturated fats are things like olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, oily fish, and they're really, really good for our heart health. And we need fats in our diet because it helps us absorb our fat soluble vitamins, and also is protective for our organs and so on. So it's really important we do get some fat in our diet. The main fat that I want to mention that I think is really important is omega-3. We find this mostly in things like oily fish, like salmon, mackerel, sardines. And it's really important for, it's an anti-inflammatory, and it's really good for your heart and brain health. So dietary guidance does suggest that we should have 2 portions of fish a week, one of which should be oily. If you are plant-based, however, you can still get omega-3 from walnuts and flax seeds, sesame seeds. But what I will say is there are different types of omega-3. And without going into too much science, the ones that our body sort of prefers we get more from the animal sources. So those who are plant-based may need to supplement with an algae-based supplement. But again, it kind of depends on whether you're having enough nuts and seeds and so on, but that's something to consider. In terms of like overall dietary patterns, then taking into account these macronutrients, Izzy covered the Eat Well guide, and that, if you haven't seen that, then it's worth looking up. So that shows you like a plate and divides up what the public health guidance is in terms of how many starchy carbs we should have, which is like your bread, pasta, rice, fruit and veg, fats and protein. It is quite generic, doesn't suit everybody, but it is like it's good for an overall starting point. If you're vegan, there's a vegan version online on the Vegan Society website, so that's worth looking because it will also tell you where you may need to supplement. For me, I really advocate the Mediterranean diet pattern as an overall eating pattern, as a guidance. There's loads of studies that back up how good it is for heart health, and even for like mental health. There's a study called the SMILES trial, which showed that the Mediterranean diet really helped with depression. The Med diet is very high in, funnily enough, fruit, veg, unsaturated fat through things like oily fish, nuts, seeds, and so on. Glass of red wine is very much encouraged in moderation, and that you can eat meat on it, but again, in moderation. It's very much based on nuts, seeds, grains, fruit and veg. So it's worth looking that up as a sort of dietary pattern. Micronutrients I'm going to talk about next. So again, as you covered a lot of this, I'm just going to focus on a couple of points. So just to reiterate, vitamins can either be water soluble or fat soluble. Water soluble vitamins are your B and C. And a good way to remember that is boats and canoes, water. And that's helped me learn it when I was at uni. What that means is you can have an intake of as much as those vitamins as you like. Any excess is just going to get excreted in your wee. If you buy like expensive vitamin C, massive high strength supplements, the chances are that most of that's just going to get peed out. So you've just got expensive pee. So I don't really recommend those. Fat soluble vitamins are your A, D, E, and K. And our body can store those. So you can have too much of a good thing in a way. And an example of that would be vitamin A. Too much vitamin A can have a detrimental effect on your bone health. And also if you're pregnant, a detrimental effect on the unborn child. So that's why we get guidance when you're pregnant not to eat too much liver. In terms of vitamins, I've highlighted B12 and D there because they're the ones that people might be most deficient in. Vitamin D, we don't get so much from food. We can get it from like eggs, oily fish, mushrooms, but we get most of it from UV rays. So if you're getting out and about in the sun, you'll be getting your vitamin D. Our body synthesizes it into vitamin D3. But in the winter months, when there's not so much sun, if you cover up when you go out, if you don't get out into the sun during the day because you're stuck in the office, then you should be supplementing. And the guidance is anyway that you should definitely supplement between the months of October to April. And that's a supplement of 10 micrograms of vitamin D a day. So all your like normal, just cheap, Tesco or Boots, absolutely fine. B12 is another one that people can be deficient on if they don't eat animal products, because that's where it comes from. Although you can get it in nutritional yeast, but other than that, it's through animal products. So if you're vegan, you're probably going to need either fortified foods or a supplement. And I'm going to come on to that in a little while. Minerals, I've highlighted 3 here that again, people might be liable to deficiency in. Calcium. So calcium with vitamin D is super, super important for our bone health. We achieve peak bone mass, as it's called, around about our mid to late 20s. So it's really important as soon, early as we can to get in calcium and vitamin D to support our bone health. And doing running and resistance training also helps out with our bone health. For women in particular, certainly when you get to the age or get through the menopause, because of the lack of estrogen, that can have a negative effect on bone health. So your calcium and vitamin D intake is really important, and you may need to supplement at that stage. Iron is another one that people can be deficient on. Iron's really important for transporting red blood cells around the body, important for energy. Females in particular can be deficient because of the menstrual cycle. And also, if you're plant-based, you can absolutely get lots of iron from plant-based foods, such as dark green leafy veg. However, it's not as well absorbed in the body as animal sources of iron, like a steak. There are certain other nutrients that can interact with iron absorption. So having vitamin C with your iron really helps your body absorb it. So if you were having, say, some spinach, some broccoli, some kale, if you could have that with, say, red pepper or a squeeze of lemon juice on your meal, or have it with a glass of orange juice, that's going to really help absorb the iron. On the other hand, if you have a cup of tea with your meal, the tannins in the tea inhibit iron absorption. So don't have a cup of tea within about 30 minutes of having your iron in your meal. Iodine is one that's less well known but becoming more prominent because studies are showing that we are becoming more and more deficient. Again, it's a worry for females because a lack of iodine can impact the health of an unborn baby if you're pregnant. Iodine is associated, linked to our thyroid. So if you're low in iodine, you can have thyroid issues, and again, it affects your energy. Iodine is found predominantly in fish products, seafood products. So again, if you're vegan, you may struggle to get your iodine, and you can get supplements like algae supplements and fortified foods. Again, I'll come on to that in a second. The other thing I'll just stress as well is, again, you can have too much of a good thing. Too much iron and too much iodine can also have a negative effect on health. So if you're unsure, it's always good to get some professional advice, and you can certainly get your iron levels tested with a blood test and B12 at the doctor's. So moving on to hydration then. So I am always an advocate of water, always carrying a bottle around with me. But why is it important? Well, our body is around 50 to 60% made up of water, and water is involved in metabolic reactions. It regulates our temperature through sweating. It's used to transport substances between cells and within cells. We need it for digestion. So it's super, super important that we are hydrated. If we're dehydrated, it will negatively impact our health ultimately, but also our performance when we're exercising. General recommendations are that we have 2 litres a day, or 8 glasses, depending on how you look at it, or depending on how big your glasses are. But we should have more if we're hot weather or exercising, because we're losing more through that sweat. So how do you know whether you're hydrated or not? The simple answer is a pee check, and nutritionists love poo and pee. It's like ways to find out about health. I haven't put it on the slide, but if you Google hydration pee check, whatever, there's like a chart with colours, and what you're aiming, it'll tell you like about your hydration level, but what you're aiming for actually is like a light straw colour, and that shows that you're pretty well hydrated. When you wake up in the morning, it's not going to be that colour because you haven't had a drink for quite a long time. So as you get through the day, just check your wee. Other signs of dehydration would be headaches, feeling tired, and possibly even nauseous. Yeah, and like I say, for exercise, you need to be trying to make sure that you're hydrated, and I will talk about that in a little while when I talk about performance nutrition. I like water, but not everyone does. So if you're not keen, then by all means, like try things like sticking slices of lemon, lime, orange in, cucumber and mint's really refreshing in the summer, or just add cordial or squash. It's absolutely fine. Maybe go sugar-free. But yeah, just whatever it takes to make it palatable and enjoyable for you to hydrate. You can get water from food as well. So cucumbers, watermelons are really high in water. Tea and coffee is okay, it will hydrate you, but perhaps more in moderation. But yeah, it's a bit of a myth that tea and coffee don't hydrate you. So what about sports drinks? Well, they certainly have their place. Water is probably enough for most of your needs, but again, I'm going to talk about that in a little while when I talk about performance nutrition. So adaptations or supplementation. Most people will be able to achieve, a good healthy balance of vitamins, minerals, and your macros with their diet. And I would always advocate what I call a food first approach. This is because these nutrients are much better absorbed. They're more what we call bioavailable when they come from food. And also you're getting extra benefits like fiber, antioxidants, and so on. So where possible, always go for food. It's also cheaper. Like, I've fallen for this in the past of like buying loads of supplements, excuse me, from like Holland and Barrett or Healthspan, and they're great marketing techniques, but a lot of the time we don't need it. So you can save a lot of money by just going with the food. That being said, you may need adaptations for if you have dietary preferences, so say like a plant-based diet, if you have allergies or intolerances. For example, if you're lactose intolerant, you're not going to be having the calcium from your dairy milk. This is where fortified foods are really, really helpful. Plant milks are brilliant. So plant milks, you should be looking out for fortification with B12, calcium, vitamin D, and ideally iodine. Not all of them do iodine. It is becoming more common now. So I know Oatly as a brand do iodine, and I think M&S do on their plant milks. If you have organic plant milks, then that won't be fortified because they're not allowed because it's organic. So it's just important to sort of really look at what you're buying. And if you aren't able to get these nutrients elsewhere and you're relying on the plant milk for these nutrients, make sure that they're fortified. Other things that are fortified are cereals. So like your bran flakes and so on. Well, most cereals are fortified with iron and other vitamins, B vitamins in particular. And then wheat in bread is fortified as well. But if you still can't get what you need from the fortification, there are some foods that aren't fortified. So like your omega-3 and your iodine and maybe your iron, then that's where supplements do come in. And the clue really is in the title. They're there to supplement your diet, not as, not to be used on their own. So where you can't get the nutrients, then supplements. So like I say, maybe iodine, that's algae supplements, and same for the omega-3, and then B12 as well. So that kind of is like a general nutrition overview. It's, fairly high level, and I know I've whizzed through it. I'm now going to move on to performance or sports nutrition. I tend to call it performance nutrition because I don't necessarily think everyone identifies as a sports person, if you like, but most people will probably want to enhance their training performance. So that's why there's just the nuance of the term. So I'm going to cover the basics. There's a lot of nuance we could go into with performance nutrition. In terms of, individual goals, training patterns, how often you train, what do you train, how intense, what is your overall daily lifestyle, and your body weight, because there's calculations that you can do for sports nutrition around how many grams of like carbohydrates or protein you need for your body weight. This is like a general overview, so it's not, individually tailored. First things first, you must make sure you're getting an adequate energy intake, so having enough calories. It's surprising how many people don't eat enough and don't fuel their workouts enough, especially if your goal is weight loss or fat loss, because you're probably going to be in a calorie deficit. And, it's a real fine line between finding that balance of calories in and calories out. And I know Izzy spoke about this in her talk, looking at basal metabolic rate and total daily energy expenditure. So there are calculations you can do. I'm not going to cover that here because Izzy's covered it, and it's not my approach. I'm a little bit more intuitive in terms of listening to your body and how your body feels when you're training. But it's important to stress that if over the long term you don't fuel your workout sufficiently, this can lead to illness, injury, and a loss of muscle mass. And for females, it can lead to what's called amenorrhea, so the loss of your period. So overtraining and underfueling in females, if you lose your period, that's like a red flag of needing some professional help to get that back. The next most important thing is your carb intake. Carbs are your body's preferred fuel for exercise, in particular for high intensity, for aerobic and anaerobic training. So this is exactly what you're doing in your Orange Theory sessions. When you jump on that treadmill, when you jump on the rower and start, your body will be using glucose, the glycogen that's stored in your muscles, first and foremost. It's the quickest and most efficient energy source for our bodies. So it's really, really important you are getting those carbohydrates in. There are, again, some sort of nuances around carbohydrates for performance nutrition. There's things called what we call training low or periodization, where a more elite athletes, or perhaps prior to a competition, will continue their training with much less carbs and adapt their body to try and get their body to adapt to burning fat as a fuel. And then just before competition, they have their carbs, and the idea is that they can perform better. And you'll probably have heard of carb loading as well. So if you do any endurance events, then you definitely will be familiar with having carbs and the run up and building up those carbs and the run up to the event, so your body's adequately fueled and got, because we store carbs in our body and our muscles. So there's some sort of nuances, but generally speaking, make sure you do have your carbs to fuel your sessions. Protein is not used generally as a fuel for exercise. Our bodies, like I say, body will prioritize carbohydrates, then fat, protein last. So if your body's using protein for fuel, then something's not quite right with your nutrition. It's a really inefficient method. But our bodies do need protein for muscle repair and growth through what's called muscle protein synthesis. We don't store, our body doesn't store protein like it does carbs and fat. So it's really important that we get a source of protein regularly across the day. So ideally in every meal or snack, just to keep that body, keep it going. If your goals are more strength-based, and I know in Orange Theory, you've got the new Live 45 sessions. I did do one the other day with Dan, which definitely become more my comfort zone with some weights. If you're looking to gain strength, then you're going to need more protein. It's more important probably than it would be for an endurance athlete. Also, if you are looking to lose weight but maintain or increase your muscle mass, protein is going to be important. Fats are also used for fuel. So I've said earlier about how important fats are to general health. For endurance training, so perhaps less so for the Orange Theory classes, but if you guys do anything else like long cycle rides, bike ride, hikes, runs, that longer level of training, then your body will start using carbs initially, and then it will move into fat burning, and the fats will take over. They're slower released, but eventually they'll take over as an energy source. Hydration, again, super important for exercise. So what you need to do before you exercise is ensure that you're adequately hydrated. If you can do a little P-check a couple of hours before you train, just to check, then it gives you time to have some water, get your hydration up before you train. If you train first thing in the morning, then do try and have about 500 millilitres, so like about half a pint of water as soon as possible when you wake up to help get that hydration up. During training, drink according to thirst, basically. I am the queen of using my water bottle as a tactic for rest when it's all getting a bit too much. But yeah, just sip water throughout your class, particularly if it's a sweaty one, really high intensity or it's a hot day. Most of the time, water is completely adequate for training to rehydrate you. If you're doing high intensity and it's more than an hour, then that's when sports drinks, so like your isotonic, hypertonic drinks, will come into play. And this is something that you can make yourself. You don't have to spend a fortune on sports drinks. You can, like water, a little bit of fruit juice or squash and a little bit of salt, mix it up, make it to your taste, and that will do just the job, because basically you're refueling your carbs and electrolytes. After exercising, you need to replace the fluids that you've lost through sweat. So sipping water rather than chugging it down is better to rehydrate. Water's brilliant, but actually milk's a really good recovery drink. It's actually absorbed slower in the body than water, so that's good. It also contains protein and carbohydrates with the lactose. So if you do drink milk, that is an option if you can tolerate it after an exercise session. So that could be like a chocolate shake or something. So do you need supplements to perform? Probably not, unless you are, really higher level elite athletes. However, even for the general population, there are one or two things that might help your performance. And I use supplements in kind of inverted commas here. Caffeine is one. Studies have consistently shown that some caffeine can help you train harder and longer. So if you have an espresso, or the equivalent, about 45 minutes to an hour before training, that will have what they call an ergogenic performance enhancing effect. Some of you may have heard of creatine. Again, studies have shown it can be effective. It can fuel your muscles to sustain an all-out effort for longer and recover quicker between intervals, for example, in HIIT training, which you guys do. It's also, you know, like sprints or powerlifting, where you need that quick, sharp, intense bursts of energy and muscle strength. What I would say is it's probably not super important unless you're training again for competition. It doesn't work for everybody, and it can have some side effects, particularly bloating. So just bear that in mind. BCAAs, if anyone's heard of those, branched chain amino acids, have been popular. However, again, I would say they're not really probably worth it. If you're getting sufficient protein and carbs for your diet, you don't need BCAAs, so save your money. Sports drinks and gels, like I say, if you're training for endurance event or endurance training, longer training, or even like a football match, like 90 minutes, you might need a sports drink or a gel. The gels have a higher carbohydrate concentration, so they sometimes aren't digested as well. So if you're going to try gels, or you want to use gels, say you're training for a marathon or half marathon, always test them out before competition day. You don't want to be doing a Paula Radcliffe because they can have upset your tummy because of the high level of carbohydrates. So they will rehydrate and refuel you. And the final one is protein powder, which can be used as not sort of performance enhancing, but more of a recovery sort of supplement. As I said earlier, most people can get their protein requirements from diets, and that is always better. That being said, I do think there's a place for protein powder. I've certainly, you know, do use it. It's quick, it's convenient. So as I said, you need to be having protein on a regular basis throughout the day. So if you are training at lunchtime and going back to work, protein shake will hit the spot most definitely. If you are a 100 kg rugby player who wants to gain some muscle mass, you're probably going to need protein powder, because that's a lot of protein to be taken in because of the body weight. So it does have its place, but don't rely on protein powder. Try and get it from your food if you can. So, you know, practically speaking then, what does all this look like? What should we be eating to fuel our exercise? So meals, as I said earlier, the quantities of like carbs and protein can be quite bespoke depending on your goals, your training regime and your body weight. This is something, you know, you could look into on a one-to-one, but in terms of general advice, just try and make sure that you get a source of protein, carbohydrate and fat into your meals. Ideally whole grain varieties of things like rice, pasta, bread, but white carbs are okay. We don't need to demonize them, and they can be good for a really quick hit of energy. I'm not particularly keen on whole wheat pasta myself, so I only have white. And also you need to be, like I said earlier, with fiber, with whole grains, just be mindful. If you suddenly start changing everything from white pasta to whole grain, it could have an impact on your gut. So the ideas, you know, what this looks like. So here we've got overnight oats as a breakfast option. I really like them, but I know they're not to everyone's taste because of the texture and because they're cold. But here we've got a really good example of, so oats will give you the fiber, carbohydrate and actually protein as well. If you make them with milk or perhaps pop some Greek yogurt in, great source of carbs and protein. We've got fruit in there, again for your carbs, but also for fiber and those vitamins and minerals. And then I would add in some nuts and seeds, or maybe some nut butter, whatever you like. Just make them to your taste. Have a play around. You can make like a batch, pop it in the fridge, and that will last you for a few days. So it's super convenient. You can move it around. You know, it's transportable if you need to have your breakfast at work, or, you know, if you don't have a lot of time in the morning. The same would apply for porridge. So the same principles of don't just have porridge, add in some fruit, nuts and seeds, just make it a little bit more substantial and get some extra nutrients in. Here we've got scrambled egg on toast. So again, great sources of carbs and protein. You could add in mushrooms, spinach, whatever you like to that, to just give you a bit extra in terms of fiber and nutrients. You can also do the same principle with scrambled tofu if you don't eat eggs. In terms of, like, could be lunches or evening meals, depending on how you structure your day. So the humble sandwich that most people now probably like don't have. But there you've got a whole wheat bread, ham, cheese salad. So you're getting your fibre, your carbs, your protein. Nothing wrong with the sandwich at all. Just make sure you've got plenty in there to fill you up for the rest of the day. Jacket potato, really good source of fibre. Here we've got white, which is good for vitamin C. Sweet potatoes are really good for vitamin A. Again, depends on your taste preference. They're both good. Try and eat the skin for the fibre. And here we've got tuna sweet corn. So tuna is a really good, cheap way of getting some protein in. Obviously, the sweet corn and salad is great for your carbs and fibre. You could do cheese and beans. We've got cheese and beans on toast here, which is basic, but I love it. I don't think you can beat cheese and beans on toast. Dead simple, dead cheap. And again, it's hitting your fibre, protein, carbs, no problem there at all. So, or you could pop, some leftover chili onto the jacket potato. So you could be a veggie bean chili or a meat chili. Again, with rice, so you're hitting all those macros. Pasta, all I'd say with pasta, obviously the world's your oyster, but try and get as many veggies in there and get a protein source in there. So that could be chicken, could be prawns, salmon, chickpeas, mixed beans, tofu, whatever you like. And here we have what I would say, I think it's probably a burrito or poke bowl, posh salad bowl to me. Play around. This is a great way of like a portable sort of lunch. I'm really a big fan of those like microwave grain packets. They're not the cheapest, but they're really convenient. And just add in things like avocado, chicken, whatever you like. So we've got black bean here, I think prawns and avocado and some veggies. But it's a great way of mixing up different lunch ideas, or even for an evening meal. So different ideas. What I would say to you is have a play around with what you like, but try and get that balance in all the different macronutrients. Think about how you feel when you work out. So if you are easily fatigued and you haven't upped your training volume or intensity, you're probably not having enough carbs. On the other hand, if you feel quite sluggish and lethargic, then you may be having too many carbs. So again, it's just finding that balance and trying, to play around with what works for you. And as I said earlier, if in terms of meals, if you are looking to lose weight in a calorie deficit but want to retain that muscle mass, then please make sure you're getting plenty of protein. Same principle with snacks. So these could be pre-workout or post-workout snacks. Now, snacks, you don't have to have snacks. Again, be guided on what your hunger sort of cues are telling you. It may be that you need to have a snack if you are training after work and you've not had anything since lunch, for example. It's very individual, again, whatever you like, whatever your tastes, taste preferences are. And again, in terms of like carbohydrate and protein, it will be individual to your training sort of needs and goals. But what I'd say to you is try and get a nice combination of protein and carbs, particularly for a post-workout snack, because you're going to replenish your glycogen stores and the protein for the muscle repair. And the same principle applies for meals, so that combination. So what does that look like? We've talked about protein powder. It certainly has its place. It's really convenient. These are really good for like a pre-workout snack, so like a granola sort of flapjacky kind of bar. You can get all sorts of different types. Just be mindful of the shop bought ones, like the sugar content. They can be like really nice packaging to suggest they're healthy, but then might be laden with sugar. If you are reasonably happy in the kitchen, they're really simple to make with like loads of oats, nuts, seeds, dried fruit, whatever you like, basically. And then just mix that together with something like honey and some nut butter just to bind it all together. Pop it in like a baking tray. They take about 15 minutes in the oven, and then just chop them up into bars or bites or whatever afterwards. Is a really good go-to snack. And the same with like dried fruit and nuts. Really good, just pop it in a Tupperware, and that's good for a little snack before or after training, certainly before training for that energy. All I would say to you about dried fruit is there's quite a high sugar content, so it can affect your dental health. So try and have it, and also like the sugar spikes, so try and have them with something else like nuts, just to sort of offset that spike. Here we've got toast, again, really basic, but like toast with nut butter is a really good little snack. Hummus, one of my favorites, with whatever you like. So chickpeas are a really, really good source of plant-based protein. So yeah, I love hummus with like red pepper or cucumber, carrot, pita breads, like toast them, good for dunking. We've got porridge here, which we sort of talked about before. That could be a snack or a meal. Yogurt, Greek yogurt's really high in protein. But try and add some fruits and maybe some nuts and seeds. Nut butter. Does anyone else eat it from the spoon? Nut butter, I really like it on those like those rice cake things, and then some peanut butter and then some banana or apple. That's really nice. Smoothies, if you've got like a blender or a NutriBullet, smoothies are brilliant. And again, you can just chuck in a load of frozen fruits, but try and put something veggie in, like avocado or spinach, and again that will offset that sugar spike and also give you a nice bit of fiber as well. Nuts can go in there, nut butter, whatever you like. And then the good old banana and apple can't go wrong. So like I say, it really depends on what you like, whether you're having it as a pre-workout snack like a banana, or maybe like the nuts or the energy bar, maybe post-workout the protein shake, yogurt, that kind of thing. Work out what's good for you. You don't need to worry too much about the detail in terms of this unless you are, say, doing a lot of elite training, or if you're training twice a day, or you're training like late in the evening and then first thing in the morning, where those snacks are quite important because you need to obviously refuel and repair your body in between sessions. So we've talked about the kind of things you can eat, or you may want to eat, and the kind of combinations that you should be looking for. But does it matter when you eat? To a point, yes. So again, this is very individual and based on your personal preference, your daily schedule. When do you train? How does that fit in with your day, your work, your family commitments? Before exercising, ideally, you want to be in a position where you're not too hungry, but you're not too full. Ideally, a meal 2 to 4 hours before you train, or a snack 1 to 2 hours before. If you go to an early morning class, like you're training before work, the chances are you're not going to have a meal beforehand, but you may want to get a snack in, so like a banana or an energy bar or a smoothie, or even just a few spoonfuls of some overnight oats. But you could be training fasted, and this is it's a topic that sets the internet alight and social media, because people seem to be very polarized in their opinions with training fasted. Studies do suggest that by training fasted, it can encourage fat burning, because your muscles don't have that glycogen storage necessarily, depending on when you last ate. So it's going to rely more on fat as a fuel than carbs. However, studies also show that it doesn't improve performance. So you might get a bit more fat burn, but it depends on what your goals are. If you're looking for performance, it's probably not for you. If you're looking to fat burn, then that's an option. But it's really, really just down to personal preference. I don't like to train fasted. I do like to have something, even if it's just a banana. I just find I just can't get going. So it's down to you. If it works for you, that's absolutely fine. If you train after work, like I say, if you've had lunch maybe like 12, 1 o'clock, and you don't train till 5, 6 o'clock, you're definitely going to need some snacks, because you're over 4 hours since you've eaten a meal. So again, like the banana, the granola bar kind of things, the dried fruit and nuts, be really good to give you that energy hit. So again, what works for you, what's portable, what can you take to work, what storage do you have, and so on. So it's just finding things that work for your individual needs. During exercise, probably don't need anything, certainly not in an Orange Theory class. During is dependent on that intensity and duration. So really high intensity and longer duration. So even like, say, could be a 90-minute football or hockey game, or if you're doing like a long run, you're going to need something to keep, because the carbs will burn off. So that's where these energy gels, sports drinks and snacks. So, you know, if you're running or you're on a bike, you might, you know, take with you a gel or even like a little bar or some nuts, whatever's practical for you during your exercise, but you're going to need to fuel that long workout. Afterwards, as I say, either a snack or a meal, just with carbs and protein to replenish the glycogen stores for your recovery and to repair your muscles. Again, like I said, don't worry too much about great detail unless you're training again later in the day. Okay, so this is the final part of the talk. I'm conscious I've been talking for quite a while. Myth busting. I think one of the big things I wanted to say is there's a lot of nutrition information out there. It's often very contradictory. We've all seen the headlines, you know, don't eat eggs, eggs will kill you. Do eat eggs. Red wine's good for you, red wine's bad for you. Coffee is good for you, coffee's bad for you. You will always find a study to back up an assertion, if you like, if you believe in it. And headlines like clickbait, it's really hard to like get to the bottom of nutrition information unless you're trained to sort of read studies. And who's really got the time apart from nutritionists? It's what we do, but I think it's really hard to navigate nutrition information online. Nutrition is always in the grey. There's no black and white with nutrition because there's always, it depends. Some studies, you know, done on very few people, could be done on rats. What might work for one person doesn't work for another. So if you're seeing people giving advice saying this is the way, or this worked for me, therefore it will work for you, that's a red flag, because everyone is different. It's only when you know all about a person and their circumstances and their goals and their needs that you can provide that nutrition advice. It's very nuanced. The term I use a lot as well is like, apologies for the swearing, but nutribolics, it's everywhere. Like I say, headlines, clickbait, influencers on social media. Just because you've got 1 million followers and a six pack does not mean to say that you know anything about nutrition. You might do, but a lot of those posts are sponsored or ad posts. So, you know, how do you know what to believe? So this is where I come back to the beginning and say it's really important that you get your nutrition advice from someone who's got the qualifications. So this myth busting then, please feel free to interact so you can use the chat box or jump on. So what do we think then in terms of eating carbs will make you fat? Any thoughts on that? Okay, carbs, there's a lot of myths out there like, oh yeah, if you eat carbs, you're going to be fat. Again, we'll talk about nuance. The devil is in the detail. What kind of carbs? As I said earlier, I know Izzy said in her talk, there are different types of carbs. If your carbohydrate intake is chocolate, crisp and cake, and you eat it to excess, then yes, it probably will. But if your carbohydrate intake is fruit and veg, pasta, potatoes, rice, and a part of a balanced diet, absolutely not. Carbs are essential. I always say carbs are life. Certainly if you're exercising and training like you guys are. Eating fat makes you fat. You can probably guess we're on a similar theme here, that nuance. There are different types of fat as well. Some are slightly better for health, not necessarily to make you fatter. Fat has 9 calories per gram, whereas like carbs and protein have 4. So it is more energy dense. But again, eating avocados, salmon, olive oil, nuts is not going to make you fat unless you just have loads and loads, or you're eating loads and loads of chocolate. Fruit is just sugar, and therefore should be avoided. So again, this is something that I hear quite a lot. Don't eat fruit. Fruit, you know, it's going to make you fat. It's just sugar. It's just a sugar bomb. The sugar in fruit is fructose, and it's digested and metabolized in the body differently to other, so like glucose or like sugar you get in sweets and chocolate. So it takes a little bit longer to digest. And also with fruit, you are getting the vitamins and minerals, you're getting the fiber, the antioxidants, you're getting that whole nutritional value, not just sugar. even as a type 2 diabetics, they can still eat fruit. It's not just a sugar bomb. So don't avoid fruit because you're worried about it. It's really important. You need a protein shake within 20 minutes of a workout. This one, if anyone has popped onto my social media, will see that I've done a number of posts recently. I've started on carbs and then protein. And I call this gym bro science, and apologies to the gym bros, but this is like a myth that the anabolic window only lasts 20 minutes. And by anabolic window, I mean, so anabolic means to build, so that building, you're getting your gains on. Absolute rubbish. The anabolic window, if you like, is 24 hours, roughly speaking. So you take something out of today is to have that protein on a regular basis, but you don't need to chug a shake before you even get home. As long as you're having protein on a regular basis, then you're absolutely fine. I'm just going to check the chat. Someone's put that they've really useful to have been avoiding avocado. Now, avocado is really good because it's unsaturated fat. Yes, it is fat, but it's the healthy fat. It's got vitamin E, so it's an antioxidant, and yeah, it tastes good. So yeah. So following on the theme of protein, the more protein, the better. Again, gym bro science, got to get the gains on, got to have protein. As I said earlier, protein requirements will be very individual depending on your goals. And you do need a little bit more protein if you're trying to gain muscle mass or maintain that mass if you're in a calorie deficit. However, studies have shown that it gets to a certain point, and after that it has no greater effect. And because the body doesn't store protein, it will just ultimately get excreted. So it's just a waste of time. And also protein is very filling. So you're having a lot of protein. You sometimes can struggle. You need supplements for optimum performance. I hope I've answered that in that you don't. There are some additions, if you say, that you could have. I mean, things like the caffeine, but you don't need supplements for optimum performance. Most people can perform very well without needing those, and so save your money. This one's a controversial, maybe not. Keto, alkaline fasting, and I've put insert fad diet sort of here, are healthy. Again, on the internet and on social media, you tend to get like camps of people who are really like pro certain diet patterns. And as I said to you earlier, I'm really not into those that are very restrictive. So keto, for example, keto diet was developed to treat epilepsy in children, and it's shown to be effective. There are no studies to show it to be effective in terms of overall health for adults. You probably will lose weight on it to start off with, because you're probably not going to eat any processed food. You're quite limited on what you can eat. But if you're on keto, where are you getting your fiber from? Where are you getting your carbohydrates to fuel your workout from? You're probably going to have like what we call brain fog. There is such a thing as keto breath. It's really, really restrictive, really restrictive. And I don't know anyone who can sustain it for a long period because it's just so hard. So yeah, restriction is not good. The alkaline diet, well, that is a classic example of the nutribolics that I spoke about. You can eat all the alkaline foods you like, but once it goes into your stomach to be digested, it hits what the stomach acid. That's what digests breaks our food down to go into the small intestine. So anything you eat is going to become acid, very strong acid. So that is absolutely ridiculous. Fasting diets, very trendy. A while ago I did the 5-2 years ago now. I did lose weight on it, put it all back on afterwards, found it incredibly hard. Fasting does work for some people. Some people really like get on with it, and there are different versions now, like the 16-8. There's all sorts of different things you can do. Probably does work for weight loss because over the time you're not eating as much, you're not having as much food. If it works for you, fine, but I don't like it because I think it's just so restrictive. I think you end up just craving stuff. And you again, if you're training on a fasting day, I think you're really going to struggle because you haven't got the energy. So these fad diets come and go, and people get very evangelical about them, to say getting overall health, mental health as well as physical health, being able to fuel those workouts. You just need that balance, and that is probably isn't the sexiest saying do this, you know, fad diet, but it's true. Final one then, and I know I've answered this earlier, so see if you can remember. You can't meet your protein requirements without eating meat products. You 100% can, unless you've got a massive you know, requirement. There's plenty of plant-based protein products out there. Okay, there's another thing on the chat. Sometimes get acid while exercising. Oh, is that when you're running? Because it could be that depending on how long ago you've eaten, I don't know whether you get acid reflux, but the repetitive jarring motion of running can cause stomach issues. Yeah, it's common to cause gastro issues. In fact, I did my final year research project on exactly that. So they're really quite common. So it's probably that that motion. I'm doing that because that's not a running motion, but you know what I mean? It's like that jarring, but it could be pushing your stomach acid up your esophagus. So you've got like esophageal sphincter that stops the acid coming back up. It could be that. There might be other things that might be worth getting checked out, but that sort of high impact movement could be just causing the acid just to come up. And again, making sure you've had a nice break before training, between eating a meal and training, and maybe look at if there's any particular foods that trigger it. Spicy foods, quite often a trigger. So, just going to move that chat. Yep. Does anyone have any other questions? Is there anything, you know, you're particularly interested in or would like covering at a future date? Please do either jump on or pop them in the chat box. What I will also say is I appreciate you might not want to pop it on here, or something might come to you at a later date. And for those who are going to watch this back on the recording, please do get in touch. So either put something on the Facebook page or contact me. Hopefully these are pretty easy to remember. Rachel Fletcher Nutrition. So website, email, or on my social media. Happy to take any questions at all, you know, either tonight or a future date. Please do get in touch. And if you see me at Derby, puffing and panting on that treadmill, then come and say hi. Okay. Thanks, Izzy. Yeah, test for iron and vitamin D. Yeah. Daniel, are you finding that you are fatigued quite easily or breathless? Yeah, irons is quite common actually. So yeah, the blood test will let your doctor know if you have got a deficiency. So it is quite common, and then they will let you know whether it's something you could probably address through nutrition. So that will be increasing your iron intake, either through things like red meat. Bran flakes are really good, dried apricots, say dark green leafy veg. And if you are plant-based or you're having those plant sources, make sure you have some vitamin C at the same time, just to increase that absorption. But you may need supplements. I personally had them in the past as well. I didn't even realize I was iron deficient. I went to the doctor for something else, had a blood test. It's like, oh no, I'm iron deficient. Had some supplements and fine now. Yeah, so if you don't eat meat, yeah, definitely. Definitely make sure you're having vitamin C. So a glass of orange juice is probably the easiest way. Just have it, but have a small one, because again, they can be quite sugary. And in terms of like your 5 a day, having a glass of fruit juice that only counts as like 125 milliliters, which isn't very much. That is your one portion for the day. And even if you had like 5 glasses, it only counts as one portion, because you're not getting the fiber. It's that you would like by having normal oranges. So yeah, if you can have a squeeze of lemon juice, red peppers, that kind of thing, with your iron sources, fortified cereals. But the problem there, like with like having say like fortified cereal in the morning, if you do have a cup of tea with it, and so you've got to try and keep that gap between the two, and that will help your absorption. But it is probably something that can easily be rectified with some supplements. And vitamin D, definitely supplement. I tend to have my supplement every day, even though it's the summer, because our summer's rubbish. There's not a lot of sun. you know, we're not always out there with our arms out or whatever. So if you are covered up, or you don't get out into that sunlight, it must be into the sunlight, into the UV rays, then have a vitamin D supplement, definitely, because that also, vitamin D can impact your energy levels as well. Brilliant. Okay, any other questions? Just want to thank you all for listening to me rabbit on. I can go go at a million miles an hour. So I hope that's been useful. Have a think if there's anything, you know, that I haven't answered, or you've got any questions that pop up. Please do get in touch, pop it on the Facebook group, or contact me directly. But I just want to thank Katie and Kat for letting me come on and talk to you guys today. I hope it was good.
Thank you, Rachel. No, really, really valuable. Thank you.